Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. We're going to get started in about 15 minutes. In the meantime, if you want to put your name and what you do for a living in the comment section below, we'll be able to highlight you and be able to showcase your profile on the screen. If you have questions for Preston Dunlap, please make sure you ask the question with a Q so we know it's a question, and post the question inside also of the comment section below as well. Thanks so much. Stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 14 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. We're going to get started in about 11 minutes. In the meantime, if you have questions for Preston Dunlap, please make sure you put it into the comment section below. We're going to have a lot of questions today. And if you want to share with us who you are and the company you're with, also put it into the comment so we can showcase your profile on the screen as well. Stay tuned. We'll get started in about 11 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. We're going to get started in about 8-9 minutes. Please stay tuned. We have a lot of questions for Preston today, so please make sure you put them into the comment section below, starting with a Q, so we know it's a question. Also, if you want to be showcased on the show, just put your name and company, and we'll be able to highlight your profile as well. So that's fun. Stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 8 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. We're going to get started in about 5 minutes. Please stay tuned. If you have questions for Preston, please make sure you put it into the comment section below, side with a Q. Lots of questions today. And also, if you want to share with who you're with, just put your company name and your name so we can highlight your profile as well. Thanks. Stay tuned. 5 minutes. We'll get started. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. We're going to get started in about 4 minutes now. If you have questions for Preston, please make sure you put it into the comment section below. We have a lot of questions already from LinkedIn, so do that. And also, if you want to share where you are and what company you're with, put it into the comment section below so we can highlight you as well on the screen. That's always fun to see who is here. Thanks so much. Stay tuned. We'll get started soon. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this new episode of In the Nick of Time with Preston Dunlap, the first chief architect of the Air Force and Space Force. We'll talk today to Preston to share a little bit of insights on what he's been working on for the last few years, but also what's coming up next. But again, if you have questions for Preston, you need to make sure you start asking those questions into the comment section below, because we have a lot of questions already from LinkedIn that we have lined up. So you want to throw your question now, don't wait, so we can make sure we answer your question before we run out of time with Preston today. Also, if you've seen, we have a lot of pretty amazing guests coming in on the show for the next few weeks. So you want to register by going to ama.privenbreach.com/register. We're going to have, of course, Lauren, the Air Force CIO. We have Jay Bonchi coming. We have Brian Finster. And Jay Bonchi, the Air Force CTO. Brian is at Platform One helping with the metrics and all the culture of DevSecOps. So there are a lot of amazing people joining the show. So you want to make sure you catch up and get those notifications over email, so you can be there for the next episode. So also we launched a LinkedIn page. So you want to also subscribe to that page, so you can also get some of the articles. We're going to be releasing some unique videos we're going to be posting there as well. So make sure you do that. We have a lot of people today on the show, so it's pretty exciting to see live. So again, lots of questions for Preston. I'm going to bring Preston on the screen now. So here we go. I'm going to put you on top because you're more important than me. Here we go. Welcome, Preston. And I think you're muted, so you just need to unmute yourself.
Yep. All right. Hey, Nick, great to be here.
Hey, thanks for joining us. So, of course, special guest today, Preston, the first Chief Architect Officer for the Space Force and Air Force. He oversees the architecture of the department, nearly 17 billion of research, development, and acquisition programs. And you create amazing partnerships across defense and intelligence community to transform technology development and acquisition, so the department can only design, develop, and buy the right mix of future capabilities, but does so more rapidly with the power of agility and interoperability. That sounds like a lot of the stuff we love here. So I was lucky enough to work with you for 2 years. Saw how you get stuff done, pretty much like nobody else I've seen in the department. So wanted to, of course, have the chance to bring you on so we can get some of your feedback on what's been going on for the last 2 years. But more importantly, there's a lot of pretty exciting things happening, right? We have this new chief digital AI office at the OSD level. There's, of course, your background we want to talk about, your mission. What are the DAF priorities in 22? You have a special announcement at some point. I'm going to let you do that. Of course, what are the operational imperatives for 23 and beyond? And then we want to talk a little bit about commercial space integration and sensors and agile combat employment and networking and enterprise data that you're working on with the CDO's office and the CIO's office. And of course, we wouldn't be doing justice to what you've been doing without talking about AI and hypersonics. So that's just a few small subjects. I think we can cover that in 10 minutes and then get you back to work, right? So there's so many people, I can't even highlight everybody. There's way too many people today. So I'm just going to go a little bit faster than usual, but I wanted to say hi to everybody. Thanks for joining us. I've seen pretty much everybody from the Navy, Army, Air Force joining today live. So I guess I'm going to start with a more basic question, Preston. If you can just give us a little bit of background on your journey and what you've been up to before the job and now for the last, 3 years since you started at the CAO?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Appreciate you having me and so many other folks on. It's kind of humbling to be in a lineup of folks that are here on the Nick of Time. So thanks for working me in. Also, a special thanks to Secretary Kendall and Chief Raymond, Chief Brown for letting me step away from the office here for a couple hours to be able to talk with both you, Nic, as well as the community that you've brought together across the various stakeholders inside and outside the government. So I always appreciate the flexibility and time to be able to communicate more and listen on all things related to Space Force and the Air Force. So sure, happy to talk about it. I think I'm sure you felt this way as for the chief software officer for the department. I think as the chief architect officer, it's just such an amazing opportunity to be able to sort of be part of the nexus of space and air, especially with the stand up of the Space Force. And it's been a privilege to be able to sort of pull back on the threads of experience up to this point, both my experience as well as relationships and people that have made the department successful. So I've had just a really fun career academically and professionally. Between computer science and international relations and operations research, sort of a mix of programming and software with international relations and understanding the policy aspects, and then with the analysis background and sort of being able to pull the three together here. I started in the commercial world, very much like you, Nic, and so many of the folks joining us here today, with two tech startup companies. One of which sort of would be sort of a big data center hosting websites and DNS for different companies, and that was just a great experience to sort of start from 5 folks in a townhouse, and then be a part of watching that grow, and then eventually sell over time. But I always had a passion for national security, so I ended up coming here to land a job in the Pentagon to apply the technology and analytical skills here, and had the privilege of working for 5 different secretaries of defense and deputy secretaries of defense over that time. All the fun of standing up and transitioning, new offices in the Pentagon, and all the pain and difficulty associated with those, but then the great outcomes of being able to make change and we're the largest employer on the planet here in the Defense Department. Has been great. So doing that both for Democratic administrations and Republican administrations, being able to sit there at that nexus of technology and analysis has just been great. Then I spent about 4 years out of government then at Johns Hopkins, and ran their national security mission area and sat on their executive leadership board. Hopkins Applied Physics Lab is a great place. They're the largest university-affiliated research center. That means that they're required to have a large set of technical skills to be able to help the government maintain that capability over time, and also served as one of the only non-government NASA centers. All others are sort of NASA related. So it was fun to be have a small hand, at least, in some of the space missions for the civil work as well. And that's when I got the call to say, the Space Force is standing up, and we've got some challenges that we want to be able to address here in the Space Force and the Air Force. And loving the job that I was at, but I was compelled by the challenges that the secretary, and at the time there was only one chief, General Goldfein at the time for the Air Force. And the story wasn't just, hey, come join the fun. It was, so we've got sort of 2 primary challenges. One is that we're not able to, and we're struggling to be able to make our systems adaptable. And that's a problem internally and externally. It's a problem externally because our adversaries, they're just moving fast and we're not able to move. Internally, it's a problem because that means we got these old systems that we can't upgrade them over time. And that's sort of problem one, was that agility of systems and being able to take advantage of that. The second one, kind of related, was we're not able to take advantage of commercial technology and opportunities and be able to pull bridges into the defense community. And so there's a whole bunch of other things around that conversation and challenges, but like the 2 really compelling missions are, I felt that the Department of the Air Force was ready to make a big move in partnerships with the commercial world in space, air, and cyber. I certainly resonated with the challenges that the chief and the secretary were facing and continue to face, to be able to make systems modular and agile, both for our sake as well as preventing others from being able to take advantage of our systems. They came up with a name. They called it Chief Architect Office. And then, why? I think because of that that modularity and design between a vision of the force of the future and then a technical design that could be implemented into programs. And so it's not an IT architect nor a building architect, but really a system designed acquisition architect. And I love that they placed it in AQ and now AQ and SQ, the Space and Air Force, because there you can really have your fingerprints and being able to help and support all the 70 plus now $1 billion of research and programs that we have. So it's been a fun journey getting to here, and it's been a privilege being able to have the honor of being able to be the first in the position, but really to stand up a pretty significantly sized team at this point to do the mission.
Well, the good news is when you're the first, you're the best. So that's good.
Yeah,
I know.
Only
I know
for a time,
right? So, one thing that I wanted to dig into, you've been helping with so many projects at the beginning of a BMS and many others since then. When you look at the mission now moving forward and what are your priorities, you have to touch a little bit of everything because, of course, with the mission we have, it's pretty difficult to get things done if you don't have networking data, a proper basic cloud capability edge, so you had to do a lot of pretty amazing things to make things happen. So what are going to be your top priorities for this year?
Yeah, well, so this is probably a good conversation. We can kind of go a few different ways here. So I think in the past, we had when we stood up there, I sort of listed the two big challenges, and the secretary and the chief, and then the soon to be two chiefs, said, "Hey, I need you guys to go take the talent, build talent, and then take them and apply it in a handful of very specific ways." And one of those we'll come back to in a moment, which we should kind of run down the secretary's now public operational imperative list that we're helping realize. But one of those was change our approach to next generation air dominance. So let's not just buy sort of a revamped system of old. Let's think creatively. So it's a privilege for the first few months of being here to be able to be a part of transitioning that from just thinking of a normal aircraft acquisition program and being able to help stand up a new PO with a new approach to being able to acquire a family of capabilities, which ties into one of the secretary's operational imperatives. And that was sort of like the first 9 months, spent a lot of time doing that until standing up the PO, and then they're off and running, and they've been doing great work. Similarly, you mentioned ABMS and Joint All Domain Command and Control. It's taken a winding nomenclature journey in the almost 3 years that I've been here. It seems to be sort of sticking with JADC2 here, at least for some period of time. And so that was, hey, we've got a challenge where we've got some platforms that have done great in an uncontested world, and they're just not going to cut it the way we need them to in a contested space. And on top of that, any individual platform's just not going to be able to solve all of the challenges against the large geography that you have in sort of a scenario like a China or Russia scenario. And so you've got to be able to bring multiple capabilities together. And so that sort of the next big thing was flipping the approach to where the department had been out on ABMS and sort of a platform-focused approach, and then being able to break it up into thinking about sensors and moving target indications, then the battle management aspects, and then the communications. We sort of put all that on one platform, and then to think about how that stitches across, and way more different kinds of sensors than before. And so that sort of took the next 9 to 12 months, being able to get that program in a way that was analytically driven and focused on operational challenges. And then about 14 months ago or so, we stood up a PO to go deliver those capabilities and oversee them to be able to deliver the ABMS program. And so that's both of those, getting the PO established and tasked and off and running, have just been great to be able to be a part of and an enabler in that, and sort of to some extent, the vision as well, making that real from where the secretary chief and the assistant secretaries wanted to go. So that kind of leads us to what the priorities are to your question here going forward. So we can probably double click on these. So let me just kind of hit the list, and then we can go back through them, Nick, and maybe folks have some specific follow-ups on these as well. But Secretary Kendall, I think it very graciously sat down in a CNAS session a week or two ago and walked through at least the very high level operational imperatives. And one of the things about our team that we've built, here from sort of scratch when I came on board just under three years ago, to now is we've got about 60 to 70 folks, about a third operator, a third acquisition, and third technologists or engineers. And you might think that that's not unique, but in the government space, it's fairly unique to be able to have one team that actually has each of those skill sets in them. We tend to sort of put those in different pockets. And that could be okay. It just means it's harder to move fast. It's harder to be able to get from here to there. And so with that collection of teammates, we're able to do that. So he's got 7 priorities that are operationally driving technology. And then we can sort of like pull the zoom lens back a bit and talk about the enabling technologies that cut across them. The first is thinking about resilient space. Love to talk more about that and double click on it. Second is getting joint all domain command and control and advanced battle management system, focus on operational challenges. The third is next generation air dominance and thinking of that as a family of capabilities. Fourth is getting sensors right, particularly ground and air moving target indications in light of the operational challenges I mentioned a moment ago. Fifth is thinking about resilient basing and agile combat employment. Lots to talk about there, and we can talk about that sort of focused announcement as well in that category that we'll be delivering here soon. And then 6 is readiness and mobilization, how to get the force where it needs to go and be ready to fight tonight. And then 7th, on the long range front, B-21 and the associated family of systems. So those are sort of highlighting the 7 operational priorities. Maybe we should just talk a little bit about some of those, and then I'll come back about some of the functional technologies that sort of underpin each of those, just because they cut across several of those operational imperatives.
Yeah, no, let's do it. And I know we have a lot of space guests today, so I guess we can start with number 1.
Yeah, great. So resilience space, I think technically resilient space order of battle. No surprise here, but this has been sort of a real passion, certainly of mine, and I, given the audience here, many of the people here, which is even just a few years ago, if I were to put up a slide that showed the number of space companies that are involved in sort of these technically challenging areas, just like 4 years ago, it'd be a very short list. Put up the slide now, and it's a long list, and in a new area. Some areas where we were the only players in the field. We meaning the defense and intelligence community, and now we've got all these tremendous commercial partners out there helping, taking on missions, looking for commercial opportunities for them, and so like the big strategic lesson for us in light of the resiliency word is that we can no longer, just like the air platforms I mentioned, we can't just have bespoke easy target, so to speak, out there that can solve everything. It's a recognition, and then you have to go beyond recognition into belief and then action to say that we need a proliferated space approach. Just a handful of things isn't going to work. You need to be able to have it, and preferably not just government bespoke, but lots of commercial opportunities, and then you can't just have the commercial space, but you have to integrate it. And so I had the privilege of being part of an exercise. It turns out it was the previous administration, but the goal was to look at the nexus of civil space, commercial space, and national security space, and look towards the future to see how we as a nation ought to be thinking about space. And shortly thereafter, we ended up standing up U.S. Space Command as a full command, and then not too long afterwards, the SPACEWERX ended up getting stood up as a separate service. So it's a real privilege to be able to go from that to then come back in here to help think through the nexus of civil, commercial, and national security space going forward from an architecture perspective. Working with the force design teams like the Space Warfare Analysis Center, and then all of the Space Rapid Capabilities Office, Space Development Agency, Space Systems Command, and others that are and RCO that are working to be able to support that community. So the Secretary's got that as sort of these are prioritized, but there are really 8 operational imperatives to be able to do that. And he's mentioned that's that's not just getting a resilient set of capabilities, but it's also ensuring that we have the ability to operate through and resilient and be able to defend as necessary. That because we've seen adversaries like the Russian ASAT test just a month or so ago that people are being irresponsible in space. And so we've got to ensure that we can, just like we do in the maritime domain, be able to help ensure a free and prosperous space economy for the world and really beyond here. And that's essential, here. So from an architecture and technical perspective, part of that is creating new partnerships with commercial entities that are doing, data from space. It means expanding, things like space access providers. So we're not just talking about point-to-point launch, but companies that are interested in bus stops and tugs along the way to new space manufacturing missions in space that we haven't thought about before, or tying in commercial imagery, which isn't a new, but there's new types of imagery like synthetic aperture radar that wasn't available before, or even signals intelligence. And these are things that we don't want to leave on the cutting room floor. These are important national capabilities, and we've got to work through strategies to be able to leverage them. And so our team has been part of being able to bring that into a data ecosystem and a visualization to be able to support the leveraging of those space capabilities, be they space domain awareness or Earth observation or communications. And one of the interesting ones on the communication front has been developing an open architecture, open communications OCS standard that will allow us to take multiple waveforms in a common aperture and a software-defined radio. And so the part of this future plan that we're getting to is to be able to have that sort of one aperture, be able to speak to government and commercial satellite providers. You've heard a lot about Starlink and SpaceX, the work that we've done with them to be able to bring that in. That's kind of the tip of the iceberg, but there are other opportunities as well where we're looking not just about the data, but also how to make direct connectivity with these partners as well. So lots of movement in the resilient space domain here.
So when we have space companies reaching out to us, where should they go if they want to get engaged in this kind of commercial government partnership?
Yeah, so the good news and the difficult part is like there's actually several folks that are trying to do this now. So in some sense, kind of like our AFWERX and SPACEWERX for the new entrants challenge, is we tried to make a common front door for companies to be able to get in. And so if you're a new entrant that's maybe on the small business side, SPACEWERX, which is part of AFWERX, is a great entry point to be able to do that. And that's less than a year, maybe even just a year, old at this point in time. And we tend to think of those as like the small grants, as well as you sort of work up to larger SBIRs, and there is that. But we're also
but it's not that small too, right? I mean, it goes up, right? I mean, just for people that don't know SBIRs, right?
Yeah, and so we had some recent announcements of $30 million matching awards, as when you can match with the PO, which is part of the concerns that I have, which is not just getting the initial phase 1 or phase 2 opportunities, but being able to move those into actual programs of record and scaled procurements, which is what the StratFi process has, which allows those larger grants when we can match the companies with them. So the three places to go to, of course, one is if you're a space company, SpaceWERX. 2. Reaching out to the various POs at Space RCO, Space Systems Command, Space Development Agency. And third, like if you're just struggling to know where to go, you can always reach out to my team. We'll be happy to get you connected with the right place if you feel like you're struggling to be able to get in the door. That's just something that we try to do. So when I'm traveling, I try to go stop by companies that want to work with our ecosystem but haven't figured out how to do it. And so, though not sort of primary mission of the Chief Architect Office, it's something that we think is essential to being able to reduce the friction in working in national security, and then be able to take advantage of the broader ecosystem that we have. So all else fails, just get in contact with me, and we'll get you hooked to the right folks.
Yeah, I think the door number 1 of SpaceWERX is pretty easy, but I have to admit that if you don't have relationships, getting into door number 2, the PEOs, is almost impossible. I mean, I have yet to see companies really find even who to talk to. There is no easy way to even have a an email. So I think we need to step up the game when it comes to onboarding, and probably end up having at least an office that could at least push to the right PEOs, because no one even understands. I don't even think the Air Force leadership or Space Force leadership understands exactly where the silos start and end within the PEO. So let alone someone from the commercial side that has never dealt it, that doesn't even know what a PEO even is, right? So it's I think we need to do a little bit better there. And I guess AFWERX and SPACEWERX are supposed to do that, but I've told the team over there that we need to do better when it comes to the matching, right? We do pretty good when it comes to getting engaged and getting the first zeros, but I find the phase 2 to be very painful, let alone phase 3s, and it's often through partnerships or networking, and takes a lot of energy when it shouldn't. We already gave them money for phase 1, and then there's really no mechanism to get the MOU to get to a phase 2. It's a lot of work, and often takes a dedicated sales guy that knows the federal side, which is often something that smaller companies can't even afford. So it's just something that's been painful. So there's a person that was asking Brian here, and I think it's perfect because it goes very well with the first bucket here. How has the Space Force vision of a digital service impacted your approach to software development and procurement? And are there significant differences that you've seen when it comes to commercial software engineering practices?
Yeah, great question. So the nice thing about having General Raymond kind of come out from the beginning, one of the nice things, and say that he wants the Space Force to be born digital, means that you've got a service chief that cares and vice chief that care very deeply about being not just an exciting force, but also being one that's very technically rich, and so that kind of top level emphasis, interest, and support is really key to being able to first, though you may not feel it at the beginning, but it moves the program, and budgets take time to be realized over time. But you've got a service chief who cares not just about the hardware, but also about the software, and making that an innovative service. Of course, recently we were able to bring on Lisa Costa to be able to oversee as the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer on the Space Force side, and she's hit the ground running from her special operations background to be able to help make this sort of strategic vision something that's more real and tangible. From a software development side, I think we're riding on the coattails of the work that's been done a lot by Nic, by you, and your counterparts across the department, here to be able to leverage the software development and DevSecOps reference design that you co-wrote and authored, but is signed out really by the Office of Secretary of Defense. That's still and its iterations, thereafter are the playbook or the reference architecture by which software, is developed and designed. And so we're trying to get more people to align to that reference architecture. It's as is often the case, sometimes it could be more, encouragement and sort of help guiding rather than sort of, forcing different things. But I am optimistic about being able to keep on a trajectory that's been here over the last couple of years on being able to get that through. That said, I'm sure many of you that work with us either in the government or outside will sort of, have real anecdotes about, hey, yeah, that we say DevSecOps, but it's not really, right? Or it's just a buzzword and it's still agile. I mean, it's still waterfall approach. So I don't have a good numerical answer to how much is sort of historic or prehistoric software development versus modern DevSecOps, but I would imagine we're probably still in the bulk of the historic and prehistoric, and some of that is kind of where the folks doing this are sort of coming from. It's also the way contracts are written. A lot of people like the products and deliveries that are misaligned to the need of Agile and DevSecOps. And so this, again, we're the biggest company on the planet. So moving is not like on a dime. So what we've got to do in this process is align the contract incentives, the funding mechanisms, the program leadership, and then making the government folks a lot smarter on DevSecOps and software practices, so that we can both write those needs more effectively, but then also sort of be a technical partner with the commercial world, not just a writer of contracts, but actually understanding what it is that the commercial folks are delivering and how they deliver it, so that we cannot stymie and stifle the work that's out there and the talent that's out there, so that process is the right process. We just got to get aligned there. And again, having it from the top, and not just General Raymond, but General Brown as well on the Air Force side, both feel very strongly about that. And so you've got the right top cover. Now it's about execution.
So, when they announced they would do a Space Force SAE, right? I was very concerned. I don't know about you, but I felt we were going to create more silos in a very siloed organization already. Creating potentially huge redundant work and more silos than we already have. Of course, people are not in the jobs yet, at least for real. But what are your thoughts on the SAE split, and how does that impact your job when it comes to dealing with the Space Force and Air Force side of the house?
Yeah, so whenever you do things like that, you get there are positives and potential negatives associated with it. So the positive is which is part of the reason for creation, is to ensure that we've got focused attention and drive on space, and that I think was rightly viewed as as not as much an area of focus as it should be. And so, I don't know what the right, budget is, and it will grow over time. But if you look at the Department of the Air Force has about $213 billion in 22 in the budget request. About 18 of that goes to the Space Force, and 195 billion to the Air Force. That's probably right for now. But there's also space activities going on in other aspects of the Defense Department that are actively being moved into the Space Force. So Space Force is doing an awful lot with a relatively small budget compared to the other services. And so I think with that, you've got to be really focused and driven to be able to deliver the capabilities. And so I think with a focused Space Force headquarters staff, with a focused acquisition arm, you've got better chances of being able to realize not only an agile future, but one that takes advantage of a different world in space than we had 4 years ago. Even three years ago.
What are your thoughts on the reinventing the wheel piece, right? My fear is soon enough we're going to have redundant networks, transport capabilities, data lakes, data warehouse. I mean, if you segment everything and not having any kind of join SAE effectively, if the SAEs were reporting to the same person, that's one thing, but I guess they report to the ender or the secretary, I guess. But either way, it's not exactly reporting to a single SAE, right? I would have liked a single SAE with two, one Air Force, one Space Force deputy or something. But how do you think we can make sure that, when it comes to basic IT stuff, we're really struggling with funding, right? You've seen recently the note on LinkedIn about IT devices and issues like that. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We know that, transport and data lakes, warehouses, silos within silos. And yet we're talking about, ABMS, JET-C2 and all that somehow has to connect and magically work out. How do we make sure that at least as your job as the architect of all this stuff, how do you make sure that it's just going to have a cohesive implementation? Not just like, hey, we're going to have APIs, but we can also reuse code and reuse Lego blocks and reuse pieces of the puzzle, so the Space Force doesn't end up creating its own stack from scratch.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the thing that's nice, and there are not a lot of organizations like this. So there's like public affairs and CIO, but my team is one of those that has on the operator patch, it's got a Space Force logo and an Air Force one. And that's key, because we've got to fix computers. Amen. We've got to, be able to stretch across there. And there's functional capabilities like those that you mentioned on networks, data, AI, software, that are essential to think of as enterprise assets that enable decentralized success.
Right.
And so there's like an organizational part of your answer, which is, ensure that the chief software office, the chief architect office, the chief information office, those are chief data office. Those are stretching across the secretariat, not just unique. That's an organizational response, I think, to your question. Then there's the sort of the technical ones, which is trying to move from, you got organizational alignment now to strategy and execution. That's where it starts maybe to get, as hard as organizational things are in the federal government. Now you start to get to aligning the planning and execution of activities that involves a very multifurcated budget process through various program elements and PEOs. And so even if you're just in a single service, that's a complex activity, let alone two services, one department. And so that's the combination of sort of leadership vision, but then holding accountable and driving that vision to reality. Even with all the difficult nuances that are there in a long program and budget process, and a carefully, tightly managed set of program elements that are specifically directed not to make themselves reliant on any other program elements. So they're not sort of like interweaved. So these are forces, these are like structural forces that are against the idea of not intentionally against, they're just misaligned with the objective of being able to integrate across a single service, let alone two services. And that requires sort of heroic activities for the financial managers, the program managers, the PEOs, the policy folks, and then leadership to be able to make it happen. And you never want to have an organization rely on heroics to be able to accomplish those things. You want to change your approach to be able to make heroics commonplace, and therefore no longer heroic action, but just the way it's done. And that in the government or any large company for that matter, I don't want to just say it's a government problem. It's just a difficult challenge to happen, to sort of occur. So maybe we can kind of click on one specific element that you mentioned there. So one of the things I'm excited to be able to to talk about, and I think this would fall into the category of where we're taking across Air Force and Space Force journey and making it a common solution across the two services. We talk a lot about the reference design for software, but two of the other imperatives that the Secretary mentioned, we can sort of here talk about sort of, we've been doing this in stealth mode, so to speak, but now we can kind of talk about it more explicitly, and that's bringing in the agile combat employment element, or the agile basing, which is an operational challenge, which says that whether you're in a conflict with Russia or China, having a handful of operating locations or one or two operations centers or intelligence centers not going to win the fight. It's just too risky with too many weapons pointed at you, cyber or kinetic otherwise. And so instead of having that, we want to be able to break up the ability to do intelligence and break up the ability to do operational command and C2 to even small echelons and small unit teams. And so that's an operational imperative, number 5 that the Secretary mentioned. But it also draws back into resilient space and resilient communications, also the mobilization elements and the target acquisition elements that he's got in number 2 and 3. And so with that, we're actually looking to, for the first time, deploy an architecture, an instantiated architecture this summer, where we will tie together two things that have been almost totally separated. So we think of enterprise, IT on one hand, and we think of warfighting IT on the other. And we've talked over the last couple of years about why are they different. In this summer, they become the same thing. And what does that mean? That means that we're reinventing our approach to enterprise IT. One, the obvious stuff, like make the stuff work. which is a complex but like necessary to solve problem. And I hear that. I experience it every day. But the second is asking the question both, why, if we have conflict, why are we using different technology and systems than we have in day to day? That means that I have to train for a different IT system, different communication links, different applications, different C2 approaches, and only certain units can have access to it. What if we just said, look, in this day and age, we ought to have not separable, but instead here, what I'll quote as an integrated warfighting network, or IWN. That is the composition or the equation of enterprise IT plus edge IT. And together, you have an integrated warfighting network that allows you to be able to go to various strips in Europe or various islands in the Pacific, take that same mobile computer, laptop/tablet that you've got in your office, which we don't currently have generally, but we want to make this pervasive on the enterprise level. And that's the same device that you use at the classified level going out to operate with in the field. That means what it looks like, its warts, and its goodnesses, where it works and where it doesn't. So you start from the individual human and you take it. So there's no new training on a new system or a bespoke system. But it's not just there. That's bucket one. You've got to get that right. The next thing is, that you got to be able to hook somewhere. So it's not just you in an island, pardon the pun, an island of yourself. You've got to be able to connect back. And we typically, if you're here at a base, maybe you've got one fiber or like a path or whatever you might expect here, just even in the commercial world. And we need even more so resilient pathways. And so Space Force and Air Force together provide satellite communications, air links, and then terrestrial and subterranean links. But often the program approach has been to think of sort of, one link hooking into one, tactical system, and you're off to the races. But that's not a resilient approach. That's a one-to-one, match. The modern approach has been to link a few of those in. The problem is when one drops, you still drop. And so the revolution in networking and the software-defined networking that we're deploying here this summer is being able to have that done in such a way, and we've proven this through risk reductions, and now we're going to deploy tranche one of the integrated warfighting network this summer, where you can have a call like this or a VTC and a phone call and using data networks on the computer and start unplugging and plugging that transport back in, and you don't drop. And that's something that is that's something that we've got to be able to do, here. And so tranche one is going to deliver the first element of that. Ingredient one, common mobile ready devices, so that you're not stuck with your big hunky desktop. So good user experience, good mobility, on the move, so wireless connectivity. Number three, multiple transport pathways, so commercial SATCOM, multiple wireless, cellular provider connectivity, all transparent and abstracted from that end user. You're just taking the computer like you would. And then finally, options for local compute and store on that, and then access not just to phone calls and VTCs, but also access to, as Nick, as you mentioned, the data environment. Which is something that's a separate project, but will be integrated into this environment. So the real cool thing that we've been in stealth mode is making this integrated warfighting network that's a combination package of enterprise and edge IT together. And then not demonstrating, not prototyping, not experimenting, but literally deploying the first tranche of that, which will be tranche one of many, to real warfighters in the Pacific this summer, and then rinse and repeating that across the various commands that need it, both in the rear as well as forward. So pretty exciting to be able to have, really for the first time, an architecture that covers the edge and the enterprise, and to not just talk about a plan and a roadmap, but actually have a deployment plan in place where operators will be trained to use it by this summer. Engineers will be hand off, and you'll be able to get that. My goal is to have a better than our traditional in-office experience at the classified level, being able to do that at the edge, disconnected or not, connected, but in a mobile fashion, going forward. So we'll see how to do that and scale that across the department so that it's not just a subset of the population that gets access to it. We'll learn as we go, but we've got to start somewhere, and this is a great way to start with partnering with our operational, both Space Force Guardians as well as the Air Force airmen out in the Pacific to make this real.
So apparently everybody agrees you have to rename it to WIN, Warfighting Integration Network. So
I like it. All right, done.
I like it too. So, there's that. So we talked about, and there's more question on space, but we need to probably move to the second PIDO or whatever the term is. Give us a little bit of a rundown, and then we need to take more questions from the audience too. So.
Yeah. So the second area.
Number 2 is ABMS JADC2, right?
Yeah, so I think the sector has been very helpful, guiding and focusing. Something that we do a lot of is, although small groups, we should do more of this. Is focus on the operational impact analysis in addition to the technical maturity analysis. And when you bring the operational potential and focus alongside the technical readiness, you can begin to prioritize what to do first, second, third. And so the secretary is really leading a great effort here to be able to focus what's a large sort of catch-all term here for JADC2 or ABMS, and to be able to focus the PO and other teams that are delivering ABMS warfighting capability on the things that make the most operational impact. It's a great approach and the right approach to being able to focus this. And it's not just a what can we do, but it's what should we do and where should we do it. So this is something that very near and dear to my heart, to be able to focus those technologies and deliver them. The focus on the warfighter is the objective, and the operational fight is the imperative, which is why he says the imperative is there. And then you'll hear him talk as well about tying in that resilient basing that we just talked about into this operational imperative as well, where we can get out of the single command and control node and break that up into a variety of subcomponent organizations, and that's a readiness aspect and a training piece. It's a defense so that I can operate and defend myself against incoming fire or whatever attacks might be. But there's like the middle column is an essential ingredient too, and that's that warfighting integrated network, or the WIN network that I've been talking about, where we can actually deploy the ability to make those small unit teams that eventually become bigger teams, that eventually become mobile, as the battlefield progresses, and get them the technology that they're used to. So it's no different than their sort of day job mission. It just happens to be in a different location. And so that's going to really sort of make the ability to operate in a distributed fashion, something that's real. And it's not just one widget; it's the combination of air, space, terrestrial devices. So it's a combination package of a holistic architecture that makes that work. And then there are various specific ABMS capability releases that the PO is going to be charged with delivering, that the secretary will direct them to do, to be able to put pieces of the puzzle together to be able to make that. He and the chief's vision real for where ABMS needs to go in support of JADC2. So that's really number 2. So
I guess there's a question related from the public here on edge devices and how this is going to impact the way we're going to be fighting. I guess so the foundation of JADC2 and ABMS is to tie it all together and enable that edge in a both connected, DDL, and disconnected fashion. So what is your prediction on how those edge device will be able to impact warfighting?
Yeah, so if you think about it now, the operational analysis is actually fairly straightforward. So if you're relying on centralized command or centralized communications for any type of operation, that can be very efficient. It can be very cost effective. And so there's a business case where it says that's the way to go. But when the ideal, which I would sort of say that could be the ideal, uncontested meets the contested, that the theory of the case there is unsupported. because you can no longer rely on doing backhaul for everything, backhaul intelligence production, backhaul command control and orchestration, and you need to be able to do that, wherever you are. We can call it the edge, but it's really just wherever you are. And so that means you've got to be able to not only talk to each other, maybe see each other, but certainly share data and applications with each other. And this is a case where the capability is far too limited today. And so delivering this will allow capability to be had such that we can sort of have that middle of the three ingredients that are necessary, in addition to the operational concept development that's going on, and the cross training of airmen and guardians, and not just the work that still needs to be matured on things like defense and survivability, but the glue in between is being able to ensure that they can orchestrate where to go, where to land, where to operate, what to focus on. And these are things that require communication. And just like his number one priority of a resilient space, we need a resilient communications architecture to be able to support that. And thankfully, this isn't rocket science inventing new things like SpaceX was doing for a decade on behalf of the launch and space community. This is being able to apply, with one or two exceptions, the work that's been done in the commercial world, plus National Security Agency's commercial solutions for classified, which allows us to be able to bring the ingredients together into the recipe to be able to achieve the WIN network's objective. So I would say it's a pretty big deal to be able to extend that. Not required is making that architecture look, feel, and be the same as enterprise IT. I mean, you could do two separate things. I just asked the question, why? Why would we do that? It means more training. It means trying to buy different devices and different connectivity for warfighting. And it just means there's more chance that things won't work, because to try it out, you have to go do an exercise. So if you're just always testing and using just in day-to-day work, the systems and connectivity pathways, then we can work a lot of those bugs, should there be, out just in day-to-day systems. And everybody wants more mobility. People want devices that are like smooth and like your iPad or Samsung tablet that you've got here, and or Surface Pro or whatever your preferred device is. And yet we don't really offer that other than just a handful of senior leaders. And I think the question is, why is that? And if we want to be able to be a digital service that needs to be able to operate either in sort of COVID times, wherever you need to be, but also in conflict, we should just bring those architectures together. So thus WIN was born.
Yeah, and I have two questions that actually I'm going to read both because I think they overlap. So that's going to enable you to do a single answer. But Kevin was asking, as a leader, how do you communicate your architecture, vision, and drive incentives and to it? And then the second one is, I don't have the name, but will your architecture requirement be published as some kind of military standard to allow industry to create prototype on their own, so they know exactly? It's true that it's tough for companies to understand exactly, when we talk about open architectures and all the things we use, how do they actually consume it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Certainly, frustration for mine as well is one where I feel like we haven't moved at the pace we need to in this. There's all kinds of things that we're doing, but this is one that we clearly need to do better on. We've got these like clunky sites that are hard to get to for things like open standards, sort of, and we could call it like kind of like NIST, but it's very clunky, and it's a virtual data library and some other sources that we have. And so I'm glad we have them. They actually exist. So that's better than nothing. But it's not good enough, both inside the government, so that we can have ease of access to be able to get farther on day one than having to reinvent the wheel each time. But also for the reason of the question, to support the commercial, community that's trying to bring capabilities. So I was hoping that we'd have it, ready to talk about here. It'll have to be the next talk that I do. But we've actually put together a development website. Well, it's in development now, to be able to have an internal and then a public-facing site. So we've got a lot of leverage, Nic, out of the website that you stood up and created for software, a place where people could go to understand the latest on reference designs and who to talk to and where to get to things like repository and Iron Bank. It's just really helpful. We need the moral equivalent of that for the rest of the government reference architecture and standards for the department. And so one initiative that's just taken longer than I wanted is to be able to deploy a more comprehensive website to be able to flag and point out where reference architectures exist. Like I mentioned early on, the open communication system, or some of the long-standing UCI or OMS standards that if you're sort of in the club, you have easier access to. But if you're not normally working in those communities, it's just harder to be able to get access to. And so there's lots of like policy things we've got to work through to get here. But the question is heard. And I've got the two reasons to do it. One is to be able to help for the first question, which is how do you align all the various moving parts inside the government, as well as enable the commercial world to be able to do their own R&D and work in a way that will align and plug in with the architectures. And that site will have two things. One is a growing collection of government reference architectures, and then also a collection, hopefully not too long, but of standards where it makes sense for us to have a standard. I'm also cleaning house where we have standards that make no sense. Like you should just use the NIST standard, and so that we can just get away from having bespoke, things and make it easier to grab onto commercial. So those are sort of a preview of coming attractions, here in terms of the outward facing approach to GRA and the standards, and where we have them, they've been very successful. But enforcement is a more difficult challenge, which is part of the first question, I think. And so one of the ways that we can do that is as programs get in the initial stages or in the milestone stages, having an opportunity to be able to educate, help, question, guide individuals into those GRAs or standards is a way that we can sort of do that final check before the milestone authority signs off on it. And so that's sort of one acquisition way that we have to be able to do that. For WIN, the Warfighting Integrated Network in particular, we've sort of gone beyond that. Is that instead of just writing a standard and an architecture with some nice pictures, we've actually went a little step farther and said we're going to also put together the initial deployment package for tranche 1, so that we can make it easier for the various POs that are going to take this, with Hanscom being a very particular central organization to this particular challenge. And then rinse and repeat that for multiple units, multiple commands. And so not only the engineering and architecture diagrams there, but we actually also have real systems with real performance metrics coming off starting this summer, and then we can push that. So that is the plan to get managed comms, deltas, PEO, in this case largely HN and others, all aligned to be able to execute it, and then to give them a little kickstart so we don't have to wait 2 years. We actually started with tranche 1 deployment for the summer.
Oh, very good. I think the website is going to be a big difference. That's what I did for the CSO to aggregate content. A lot of questions we're getting are the same. So I think having a single place where people can go to. It kind of goes back to the question, the comment I made on PEOs is Jay here. That's also saying, just as with space, on the ABMS side, getting an audience at RCO is very difficult, and follow-up to initial audience is very difficult. And he would love to get some of your advice on how to engage with RCO, I guess.
So I mean, I think there's probably specific questions there, but happy to kind of help off to the side for folks that are having trouble. So RCO's got broadcasts out to the world to go address specific ABMS technologies. And so if you're not engaged in their industry days or those would be things that you should definitely be doing. I know they're trying to scour the world on capabilities that they could pull in. I'll also open the aperture. Remember, so there's a specific ABMS program, and then there are programs that we have in the Space Force and the Air Force that contribute to the all domain command and control or integrated networking that are in various programs. So, the other thing that I would just suggest is, you should be thinking about AVMS because that's an important program. But sometimes the leadership uses AVMS as a much broader term, as many programs that contribute to being able to do joint all domain operations, and that's from Space Systems Command to Hanscom and communications, connectivity to various apertures of radios on fighters or tankers and kind of everything in between. So there's the specific program, and then there's the AVMS contributors, which touch many corners of the Space Force and the Air Force. So don't think just because you're not sort of tackling the RCO challenge wherever they may be that you're not able to contribute to that important priority for the department. There's lots of places where that same functionality is being worked. And so that's the beauty of it, where we've got a lot of Secretary's got people singing on the same sheet of music. And so we're trying to drive folks into that connected future.
Yeah, no. So let's talk about the number 3. And I forgot what's number 3. So
yeah, so number 3, next generation air dominance. So in GAD, so I mentioned sort of taking it into more of a modular approach that Dr. Roper unveiled just very brilliantly in one of his final acts, so to speak. But the Secretary is pushing on various elements as well. So kind of pulling a thread on some of my previous history here and things like Avatar and Skyborg, the uncrewed aerial platforms. Where we've been working for a while at maturing autonomous technology to be able to have partnering capabilities alongside a crewed or a manned platform. And so the Secretary here really is now using the word sort of family of systems as he unveiled here in the CNAS talk. And the CONOP is being able to have a piloted system, being able to quarterback, control, and coordinate a set of unmanned platforms. So this gets into communications, it gets into autonomy of flight, some AI, but really with that quarterback sitting there, calling the plays and focusing them. And so there's a series of technology, opportunities that we have to be able to push on the boundaries here. This is something we've worked in the Loyal Wingman program at AFWERX for a number of years. We started it at the Strategic Capabilities Office under Avatar and Skyborg program. And then the Air Force and AFWERX picked that up as well, trying to mature this capabilities through Valkyrie and through the Skyborg solicitation. So we've got opportunities in different places here. We also did some on munitions as well, technology activities with AFWERX. So we've got a number of those. I just listed a few there where we're trying to bring in autonomy partnered with a quarterback to be able to achieve where we need to go. So we've got the PO focused on NGAD doing great work. And then now being able to sort of see, we want teams of systems operating, be able to churn the technology associated with not only the vehicles themselves, but also the ability to effectively communicate, share information, task, retask over time as well. So that's it kind of like makes me transport back a little bit, hitting their number 7 with the B-21 program. So it was in 2010. It set up a new office for Secretary Gates to. He had like 5 priorities every year that he wanted to go tackle at the SecDef level, and we pulled together a new team to go do that. One of those at that first year was what to do about long-range strike, and to think about it as a family of systems. And out of that, we started the B-21 program. That was 11-ish years ago at this point in time. But we thought about it. My team thought about it as what systems need to work together: communications and intelligence, the strike platforms themselves. We even had hypersonics. I had that in the mix as well. And so it's kind of a similar look here with NGAD, which is, it's not just about a fighter, it's about an ecosystem that needs to work together. And so that priority there is getting after that new operational approach and being very successful with that and the connected programs.
So that was number 3. What's number 4?
Yeah, number 4 is getting after a sensor, a future sensor gap or an operational challenge that we have now. The Secretary likes to talk about as is the chief, sort of the challenge in getting large platforms in close to places with a survivability challenge. And so in particular, he's asked us to figure out how to be able to get things like sensing in contested environments, particularly on air and ground moving target capabilities, which had historically been done with sort of large, aircraft platforms. And that he sees that as a challenge in the operational environment. He's seen that for a long time as a problem. And so the question there are what alternative technical and operational matches can come to bear to be able to get and track moving targets. So that initially is an MTI challenge, but then it moves quickly into more refined information on characterization and so on. So think of this as like a how do we get after dynamic object recognition in vast expanses, and to do so in a contested place. So that's not much more to be said on that one, other than it's an important aspect of the sensing and the kill chain to get after them.
So number 5.
And number 5, we talked a lot about, that's the resilient basing and agile combat employment. So we talked a lot about the networking aspect. So just say too, and another element of the architecture that I'm, I don't want to say concerned about, but I want us to emphasize sort of like the big sort of missing piece there was the networking and connectivity on the edge and distributed on the move. And so we're working to solve that one. Sort of in the wings there, as well as thinking through things like hardening, deception, defenses, how to be able to survive in a kinetically and non-kinetically contested environment, where you got to have fuel and weapons and runways that work, and and teleports that work, and SATCOM dishes. So you got to be able to maneuver and then defend, and that's sort of another element of the architecture that's important to be able to get after. This is something that I've looked at analytically, probably for 12 years at this point in time. So this is not a new sort of challenge. I think analytically and operationally, the Secretary is certainly trying to get very serious about making sure that all the Legos are in place to be able to make the concept work as effectively and efficiently as possible. And so we've got to look at all those different dimensions and buckets to capture more. So it's encouraging to see him really focus on ensuring that we can operate resiliently, whether in space or in the air or on the ground.
I guess we have a great question back to your contested environment example on how do you see advances in quantum sensing that could potentially address some of these gaps?
So I'll just take it more general. So in general, things like quantum, which goes in a bunch of different directions, and can and has historically. We've got efforts to try to see what how quantum technology can support not only in the cyberspace, but also in other compute opportunities. And so we're seeing that mature. We're seeing commercial companies push that as well. And so I would say right now it's a little too early for me to be able to sort of declare one way or another how that technology space is going to play out, other than to say that we know it's going to be a critical aspect of the future, and we've got to keep our finger on the pulse of the various applications of the technology. But it's definitely on the tech radar screen.
Great. Next, how do you call them? Pillows? What's the name anyway?
Operational imperatives.
Imperatives. There we go.
Yeah, so the 6 of 7 here is looking at readiness and mobilization. So pragmatically, the chief and secretary have designated a set of wings that will be sort of on the ready to be able to deploy to particular theaters and operations. So he's got 5 of those designated, and we're working on ensuring that they're outfitted, ready, and trained to be able to align to the operational missions that they may be called to do. So not just out at U.S. Air Force Europe or Central or Pacific, but actually having sort of rear echelon units get trained and practiced and ready to be able to up the readiness and mobilization of that, or we call them sort of lead wings and extremists, there to be able to do that. And so the sort of stage 1 of that. There's also a data element to this as well, so that we can tie into something that we've been sort of tap dancing around, but maybe we can use this as the leverage point here. We've got an initiative that's across that we've been sort of leading at the request of the secretary and the chiefs, but it touches every element of the department, and that's to build a Department of the Air Force enterprise data fabric, and with a sort of first look at space domain awareness as sort of the first early adopter partner. But readiness on the Air Force side is sort of the second pillar of that dimension, so that we begin to integrate data into an ecosystem. That's, we've got data all over the place, but normally it's sort of stuck and difficult to get out, or it's stuck in a proprietary weapons system. We do have a handful of 5 or 6 larger data specific efforts that are there that we don't have connected as we would like them to be. So we've got all this various, I think repository might be too nice of a word, but different places where we have access to data, and so we've got to be able to unlock that. And one of those is being able to pull in the readiness data that we have into operational data, so that we can more easily know what's available where, what the status of those systems is. And so our readiness community and logistics community has been actually working in the background on data environments to be able to produce that information. And then we've tried in various exercises to leverage that readiness data into actual operations. This DAF, maybe the audience can help come up with a better like win. I like that. So thinking caps on. What's the cool name? Because DAF data and enterprise data environment's not so cool. So let me know a better name. But effectively, we're building a data fabric for the Space Force and the Air Force, which allows the potential, kind of like platform Windon on the software side, where you can have a party bus where multiple people can work in it, or you can have a big bang distribution where you can have it locally. Same concept for data. So you can leverage the enterprise data environment, or you can have the hooks, APIs, Kafka streaming to be able to publish and subscribe data across the system. And you need both in the environment. It's essential for us from a business perspective. It's essential from a warfighting perspective. But we've just begun just a couple months ago on building the MVP for that DAF data fabric, which will be essential to many elements of this. But certainly the readiness is one of those key databases that actually does exist, that we can tie and leverage more, more for the future here. So that is both DAF data environment, subject to be renamed, and the readiness initiative. Yeah,
we're gonna need to find you a cool name. So hopefully everybody that has an idea could post the name in the comment section below. So, and David has a question also regarding your broader way of prioritizing and making decisions. But how do you decide that something is no longer worth the effort, and how do you communicate those no decision to stakeholders?
Yeah, well, so it depends on what level, right? So at the most strategic level, the Secretary Kendall in particular is so knowledgeable about all aspects of Space Force and Air Force that he and the Undersecretary and the 2 chiefs are able to quickly understand and analyze the information and be able to make decisions. And the way he wants to see hard-hitting operational analysis, he wants to see technical maturity analysis, and then we'll make those calls for like the big palm trade-offs and choices. And so and if you don't have the analysis or don't have technical rigor, it's not going to be a good meeting for you. And so I think and people have experienced that. So I think we've got a leadership team that knows kind of what questions to ask and how to push. And so at the strategic level, the 2 chiefs and the Secretary and Under are making those decisions here, but they want those decisions supported by quantitative analysis, operational and technical. And so for them, those big moving parts, that's how they make those. And then there are, of course, decisions at lower levels, like, okay, we're going to go pursue this capability. Now is it this or that? And so those are, more, I don't know, say tactical, more operational to tactical, sort of in nature. And that's just like, there's way too many sort of approaches to being able to address that in a very comprehensive way. Other than to say that we are trying to take a Nic likes to use the SpaceX example. So since you're hosting, I'll just do that. Right? We're trying to take more of that, approach where you're not afraid, to try to fail something or push hard. But when you do, you change and learn. And so that mentality, our Assistant Secretary for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, both the prior and current acting, are trying to push that same mentality so that we learn fast and then maneuver. But 2-part pragmatically with the Palm, that's the secretary and the the senior leaders that are making those decisions, and those are clear through the Palm. And then there's the technical choices, down that are material leaders, senior material leaders, program executive officers are doing to be able to pick the best solutions to being able to achieve those end states and objectives. And the culture change over time is being able to try, learn, stop, and start more effectively. And we're certainly seeing that, like the WIN network work that started in one place and is kind of where it is at now. And that's been done in just a 6-month window because of that agility mindset to be able to grab and sort of take. You have the operator say, this is my problem space, and then to be able to make choices like what's technically available and achievable, rather than sort of, I don't know, the catchphrase unobtainium, but not some sort of like far-fetched requirement, but instead just get packaged together a set of capabilities that gets you more than you have today. It's a clear operational need that fills a gap that's not filled today, and it does it in a way that you can get it deployed faster. And so that's more of like a culture approach, and you can't do that for every system. So like you can in some portions of the Space Force and Air Force. So you can't always take that approach for something that just will literally take a long time to be able to do RDT&E and develop. But for the things where we can take that more agile mindset to start and stop, we're certainly trying to encourage them.
Yeah, that's good. So there was a question from someone, but I don't have the name. So, and he's very much right, or she, I don't know. We have big shortage of labor for advanced manufacturing. How do we get VCs to invest more in advanced manufacturing to build resiliency, agility, and lower mission costs?
Well, I think you should talk to VCs. So, VCs will make choices about what to invest in based off of the market that they see, and the potential of, 5-10x returns at the end. So if VCs see the potential in commercial or government space, then if they're smart, they'll probably invest in those areas. So. And I'm sure that's a VC by VC type of scenario. For us, we've seen across the Department of Defense, not sort of in my experience here, additive manufacturing playing out both in terms of repeat production of parts. If you can get the cost right, you can design certain elements in additive manufacturing in a way that's more difficult through traditional machining. And then, companies, I imagine, are making the choice on machining or AM and what's more cost effective to be able to support, systems. But I would leave it to the VCs to decide how they want to invest their money or not.
And Craig was asking, 60% of all data is cold data. I would argue probably even more than that. But what's the Air Force and Space Force plan to be more cost-effective managing our cold data?
Yeah, so I think this for me really ties into this where we ought to be heading with the soon-to-be renamed DAF Enterprise Data Environment, which certainly there's a focus on current and real-time data, but there's a whole swath of data that needs to be considered here, not simply for analytics, but also for analytics, particularly driving things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, so that you may not appreciate data now, but one day you may need to build an algorithm based off of historical information, and having machine learning execute is very difficult if you don't have data. So there's a technical mean here, which could be like the managing and storing of such data at a reasonable cost, which is a great business question, because you can you can do it perhaps like a large corporation, could inside of a common environment, but then in the DoD that translated into a rather hulky enterprise level program element that looks like it's sort of a support function and makes it difficult to be able to to defend and to be able to explain, and so you tend to end up in these small versions across the program by program or sub program by sub program element. And so that's where the business and the conversations with OSD and Congress on how to support that in some sense takes more of like a business approach to it than like a technical approach as the greatest challenge. The technical approach is important. We're tackling that with the data architecture environment and the fabric that connects them. But from my perspective, I'm not, it's hard, I don't want to be too bold in the statements, but I'm less concerned about the technical choices associated with that than I am about the business approach to being able to make it realized and how to pay for it and how to incentivize programs and the overseers of programs to be able to leverage that type of capability. And so what we can always fall back on the providing tools on the shelf that communities can pull from to leverage, and I think we can certainly move there as long as we're aligned on the architectural vision. But I think many would say that's not enough, right? We want to be able to. That's too much duplication. That's too much reinventing the wheel. And so there's sort of this ideal case we're able to come up with the non-intrusive but truly enabling enterprise functions and services that are available, and that's sort of like the business debate going forward, and what's pragmatic, what makes sense from a cost perspective, and then what you can do from a programming perspective. But I think there's some technological challenges there. I just think a lot of them, or at least for us initially, are going to be sort of like more mundane but really important programmatic, budgetary, administrative approaches to that challenge.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. No doubt. So what is the next operational imperatives on the list?
Yeah, the last one is thinking about long range strike of the B-21 systems. So like I mentioned earlier, this takes me back to 11 years ago when we were when I was asked what help the secretary think about what we should do for long range strike. That resulted in the start of the B-21 program and a handful of other programs as well. I ended up writing the language to move tens of billions of dollars around over X number of years in response to those decisions. But it's a very significant strategic choice by the secretary at the time to invest in long range strike. So the secretary is looking at ensuring that we can not just deliver the B-21, but the NGAD conversation of family that enables the mission of long range strike, there, which is important from a sensing and a C2 and a communications pathway. So he's drawing on the operational imperative to be able to do that and ensuring that we're aligned in the best way to being able to achieve those objectives. Not necessarily in there mention, he's expressed in his most recent talk, ensuring that we get hypersonics right. But since it is in the long range strike category, I'll just mention the one thing that I didn't get in back in 2010 was trying to really focus and invest heavily in hypersonic technology. It actually took a little bit later when Secretary Panetta was the secretary to convinced that we should, I didn't go as far as all in, but really get serious about hypersonic, both defense and offense capabilities. And so I had the privilege of being able to then do the analysis and then show the benefit and then program out what was renamed at the time. We renamed it as the conventional prompt strike capability that the Navy now has and is pushing. But there was like limited science and technology going on. My analysis had shown that wasn't going to cut it in the future, and we identified the operational challenges and the need for hypersonic technology. Of course, hypersonics are helpful because they go fast and then they can evade, and so there's all the reasons why we're concerned about adversaries having hypersonic weapons, where you could take advantage of those same factors. I didn't think at the time that we were really serious about pushing on that. And so at that time, we were able to shift resources to be able to get much more serious about, at least the Navy at the time, having the ability to do hypersonic strike capability, which continues as a program today. And sadly, you've got the former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, stating publicly things like, hey, China's done lots and lots of tests over the last 5 years, hundreds of tests, and we've only done 9, and that's things like that are going to be essential to the long range strike portfolio, and we've got to get after the panoply of technologies and systems to be able to do what needs to be done here. And I think it continues to be Undersecretary Shu's one of her focus areas over in OSDR&E to be able to get after. And now it's not just a Navy thing, but we've got Air Force, we've got Army, and the Navy all sort of aligned to get after the capabilities. So not really in the B-21 long range strike operational imperative, but I just since a lot of people are interested in hypersonics and where it's going, especially since General Hyten made it a really sort of serious issue as he was on the way out, or just mentioned that that's something that the Air Force is certainly pushing on to be able to make successful, and looking to various commercial partners to help make that sort of dream a realized dream, and not sort of something that keeps moving into the future.
Do we really need all the services to be working on hypersonics, or what do you think?
I don't think that it's a question of do all the services need to work or not. So, Congress has been starting to think about, or maybe as a report I saw recently about, hey, you guys should all work together. I think Undersecretary Shu is trying to take that to heart to be able to align the efforts. They're all a little different, different ranges, different launch mechanisms, and so. There's some basic core elements are going to be essential that you can share, and we should be, sharing. On the other hand, at least what I was doing back in 2013, it turns out it was, decently different. Some of the, whether you're trying to launch from an aircraft or from, the submarine or ship or ground, and so there's elements that are going to be unique to those different service applications of them. So always good to share and partner more closely. But if you want to make something real faster, you got to think about the full integration. And so one of the pivot that I helped do in 2013 was moving from a sort of platform and operational context agnostic science exploration activity and focus it on one application and one platform. Has even though it's slower than I would like, actually helped expedite the maturity of those systems because there was some focus there. So yeah, share information we should, but just like everything else, the integration on whatever the platform is that it'll operate on is going to be a complex activity and not something to sort of be, shirked.
That makes sense. And I guess someone was asking if long range strike will only focus on hypersonics, or if you're gonna maybe one day include and expand to things like space postures capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, long range strike is just long range strike. So you can get to whether that's we talked about hypersonics just now, but you could also have mix of B-21 capabilities and shorter range weapons. So just those are things that we do today. We can do them more effectively and more creatively in the future. So I think that's why it's we talk about why Secretary Gates had the long range strike front-end assessment. It wasn't the B-21 or assessment. So trying to look through those options, and so whether that's done with a longer range high-speed missile like hypersonics or a short range, those are choices that leadership can make over time.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we didn't talk about is this new CDA's office and some of the work around AI that you've been doing. Maybe you can share a little bit of thoughts there.
Yeah, so so great news on, I think officially today, the Chief Digital and AI Officer Office is called IOC, Initial Operating Capability. So this has been, if you're not tracking, the intent here by the Secretary of Defense and also particularly Deputy Secretary Hicks, she has been clearly recognized that there needs to be strong alignment between software, data, and artificial intelligence. And she's been looking for ways since she arrived as Deputy Secretary to be able to bring those communities together to be able to execute and make the talking points and the vision real. And so at her level, she made the choice to be able to bring together the chief data office, community, the joint artificial intelligence community, and then the digital, defense digital service on the software side of the house. And so, like at a minimum, being able to bring those three communities together under one organization to be able to, in most of those cases, administratively align, but clearly operationally align, to be able to support her objectives for the department as a whole, and then provide services and functions that the services can then be able to leverage. And so today was and she brought on just a tremendous individual named Dimitri, who's been helping her organize, plan, and then bring this to fruition here through IOC and hopefully even farther here. And so he's been doing all kinds of work behind the scenes, talking to everyone across the community on how to set this up to be successful, both for Pentagon as a whole, but also to ensure that it is an enabler and partner with the various services who do most of the execution of the defense dollars and the programs. And so it's not simply an OSD thing, but it's also a Department of Defense-wide thing. So, big day today for Jim and the Deputy Secretary doing that. I think she's right to recognize that you can't just sort of jump to AI without having network, compute, data, and software sort of moving there. It's not just sort of a one and done thing. You've got to be able to bring it all together. And so I'm just encouraged that she recognized that and has dedicated so much time personally to being able to at least bring the initial strategic alignment of organizations together here. And that's sort of step one of many. But I think we clearly see the need to make AI. We talked about data already, but to make AI, my words are to operationalize AI. What I mean by that is to make it something that we actually understand the pros and cons, risks, the limitations, where we should and shouldn't use it, and how. In other words, the situations upon which algorithms should be applied and where that algorithm shouldn't be applied. And if we understand that and the performance of those algorithms, then we ought to move it into early and more maturing operational states. So getting out of the research lab and then get it into the floor. We can do that easier on things like business systems and business analytics. But this past year, about 6 months ago, we actually deployed pulled artificial intelligence algorithms that we'd been maturing in different parts of OSD and the Air Force, and then put them into our common DGS or intelligence apparatus to be able to do things like object recognition. This is very small, like it was just kind of a start, but it's I think unless we start, it's hard to move. And so, our goal was to take something that we had an understanding of the performance and the limitations, and then begin to apply that, get operators used to working with it, and then begin to use that as sort of like a foothold to continue to grow. That's sort of the like start small and then expand approach. And I think with the deputy is trying to have a more like a strategic approach to what can we do to enable a data environment that would allow us as a department with lots and lots of data to be able to be more effective at generating machine learning algorithms from an enterprise like data environment. What AI algorithms can we get out of sort of like single purpose and be able to deploy it broadly? And I think the next questions will be things like, what are those functions and services that the CDAO can provide that not only take the vision forward, but then also bring the services on as partners, and which is a thing that needs to be done, and not everyone does it well, but it's important for this organization to do that. But then also provide enterprise level functions that either make it less costly or make it easier for the services and the program offices to go do what the Secretary of Defense and the service secretaries call them to go do and achieve. And I think I'm optimistic that given the deputy's push on this, that we've got senior leadership, direction and buy-in, which is always important at a big initiative like this. Proof is always in the pudding. How far will we go? What will we do? And so I think we'll see that flesh out in more specifics on the organization, what the priorities and focus areas, who the leadership team is going to be, and all these things that are important ingredients to make it real. But every indication, and I think this is that Deputy Secretary is very serious about this and passionate about not only innovation in general, but making AI more than a talking point. So we should definitely keep the ear to ground and watch how this goes. But it's something that could have the potential to actually make a difference, and so that we can go top down as well as sort of our more bottom up start and then grow and then meet in the middle. That's be something that I would like to see.
So when you look at the needs of AI, right, and you're thinking, same concept as we are thinking of the data fabric, there is a need also to have a kind of a polybus of creating models and getting them accredited and being able to have a multi-tenant environment, but also need to have a kind of a big bang, right, of AI. How do you see, and who do you see kind of taking that on for the Air Force? I guess who is we don't have a chief AI officer. So does that falls inside of the chief data officer office, or who is kind of leading work in AI for the Air Force Space Force?
Yeah, so right now it's various pockets. So you've got my team leading on the architecture to enable AI, and of course the MVP we deployed out to USAFE earlier this year. We've got the earlier stage MIT accelerator work that we've got sort of from an academic engine perspective, and then on the Air Force side, we've got a team that is called a cross-functional team on artificial intelligence, looking at prioritization of AI. And there's sort of a bunch of scattered organizations that are looking at the application of various elements of, we'll call it all the way from autonomy to machine learning and AI elements there, and activities at the research lab as well for Space Force and Air Force. So I don't know if there's been a designate. I'm not aware of a designation for, this is the person whose responsibility and authority for AI for the Department of the Air Force or not. But maybe that's a good idea to go do. Sometimes these things, once you get a CDAO in OSD, sometimes there's a repercussion where you need to have an equivalent person in the different services. So we may see that happen more so, but I don't know. I may be wrong at this, but I would characterize it more as there's a bunch of pockets of individuals working on AI across the Space Force and the Air Force, rather than sort of like a single point that's pushing all AI. Yeah, when you have Lauren Knossenberger on, she may have a view as the CIO who now owns CDO as well here for the Air Force. That's a natural extension to do sort of artificial intelligence inside that portfolio. But at this point in time, I'm not aware that we've sort of designated an individual other than great American heroes trying to get the job done.
Yeah, it's probably a little overdue, and I find a lot of companies trying to help with AI after I left, reaching out to me, and I had no clue who to talk to. In fact, I couldn't really point them to the right people because I don't even know who is doing great production-ready AI modeling other than Jake. I mean, a lot of people go to Jake, but maybe some FRL pockets, but I guess, is there any team that you're thinking about when you think of, some of these companies trying to bring some of the best AI models from the commercial side into the government? Where would they go? Who would they talk to?
Yeah, so I mean, I listed some of them already. I think one of the most mature that we have in the department is Project Maven, which is very focused on object recognition. But they've done tremendous work over the years. They've been around a long time, but they were very focused, and they were resourced, and they were given runway to run. And so I've been very pleased with what they've been able to produce. That we have leveraged and continue to leverage some of the work that they've done in the Space Force and the Air Force. Yeah, you mentioned Jake. That's the common, that's obviously the most publicly, understood place for DoD. Now the CDAO, team, which has absorbed, Jake and DDS, and to some extent CDO up in the OST level. For us, at least my team, we're tackling it from the architecture and initial, tranche deployment of ready AI algorithms. But we're trying to be focused as well. And so our primary transition, element for that is the intelligence enterprise. So getting these algorithms available to those operators that have to process and exploit massive amounts of data. And so they've got a real problem. They know it's a challenge. They've got great humans there that can understand and sift through data. They just need help to be able to do that faster and more efficiently. So it's a great community to be able to put a hook into to start that. And so our primary operational partner is the whole 480th wing and the intelligence community there that splits into all of the regional DGSs and ties back to the Joint Intelligence Operations Centers on the combatant commander side. So that's our sort of operational side of the house. And so I've got a great person on the team or set of folks that are working on this that have come out of that community. And so good partnership on trying to transform the way we typically do intelligence production activities. And so it's a cultural revolution that has started happening in the last several years in the community. And so we found it to be a great partnership on the operational needs side. And then let's partner and deliver. I'll call it like a funnel. So we've got the accelerator, we got the research lab, we got UARCs and FFRDCs, we've got commercial entities. Now we need to funnel those algorithms into the operational community. And though that's not the primary job of CAO, to make things real faster, you mentioned at the beginning, you've seen us be able to make stuff real, faster than some. And part of that is just when you see something that works, you need to get it out into the hands of the people that need it. And so this is just one of those areas that when we see it work, left hand, right hand together, go get it on the DGS floor. And even if that means starting small. And so that's part of it's not so secret sauce about being able to make something that feels like it slips through your fingers, like AI, and make it something that's tangible and sticks.
That makes sense. So there's a couple of questions that are related on, removing barriers of transition between AFWERX and SPACEWERX. I know you care as well as I do about the Valley of Death and also how do we expand the DIB to have more options, more diversity. There's a question of also on how can we leverage OTAs in combination with creators to co-share the risk in developing innovative projects for the PMOs, so we can do more for the money.
Yeah, so I think this is great questions on how do we be able to expand the ecosystem that we can leverage or partner with. There are many things to that. I am excited by the focus that the creation of AFWERX and then SPACEWERX has had on being able to energize and bring into the ecosystem new entrants. I think like the first year that we did AFVentures and AFWERX, I think there were something like 700 organizations that had never had a contract with at least this department had new contracts with they could be small, but they were new contracts with the department. That's a large number. It also means there's a lot of sifting between 700 to some smaller number that then maneuvers through. From like a small, although we wouldn't like it as a small startup business, I think there's a recognition by both VCs and startups that that not everything is going to win, and so I think people recognize that just because you're in the door doesn't mean you're going to make the big multi-billion-dollar program or something, and I think that's okay, even though it's disappointing. That's okay. But what's maybe more concerning, at least this is sort of my temperature taking, is that if we don't see very many making it at all, so we recognize there's going to be winners and losers, but if there's sort of no pathway to sort of the next tranche level, then that's where people start losing faith or backing out or, not sort of taking their dual use technology and putting the energy it takes to go make it work for federal customers. And so I think that's where the like we're starting to get in the honeymoon phase is sort of subsiding a little bit. Now it's the proof is in the pudding to scale. And I could be off on this. This is just my personal concern to make sure that we, keep the faith of the companies and the investment world that the Department of Defense is a good place to partner with and to, co-invest with, going forward. And so, with that, you've got things like the Strat5 financing, which does require a PEO or program to partner with that entity so that it's a way to begin to bridge that valley so that you're at least working with a customer that's going to have a program of record that scales. We've got some that are now into that pathway. And so we're going to see how that plays out in a bigger way. It's a good pathway, but that's due to the limited pots of money in these cases. That's still a small number of the overall, situation. And so I still see a greater need for us to be that left hand, right hand, all these commercial potentials to either the people force designing that maybe hadn't thought about something that they should ask for because it's available commercially, or on the backside to the PEOs that are executing what they've been asked from the force design people, but maybe they're not aware of the potential to go do something that they hadn't done before. So getting that education and that process, both on the design side as well as on the acquisition execution side, is critical. And we haven't cracked the nut on that, I know, but it is something that I care a lot about, as do Nic. I know you do, to make this work, reduce the friction, and increase the number of people that make it across the bridge. And I think more is harder than I suspected coming back. I thought, well, if we could prove the real case of how technology works, there's an operational problem, we'd be able to work through the administrative bridge to get from good idea to large program of record. And what I found is that it is much harder than I've seen in the past to be able to create the programmatic structures to ensure that the tech can ride along that bridge as it's being built. So you got to have both in place. Going forward here. So I think that's essential. The mechanisms, the OTAs, the second question, or CRADAs, as long as those are done well and appropriately, those are great mechanisms that can and should be leveraged. Our head of contracting, Cameron Holt, Major General, is always great on the tools are there for you to leverage and make use of. And all those tools are at the hands of our contracting officers and program managers to go execute. And so doing things like CRADAs are a great way to go do that, as suggested, and OTAs are a way to get things moving faster. This secretary has been working in acquisition for a long time. He's focused on analysis and trying to get smart capabilities delivered faster. And so he's a former acquisition, undersecretary. So he kind of knows what it's like in the trenches, and has and will continue to push. Of course, now we're waiting on confirmation, but when we get the SQ and the AQ, appointees, and now Ms. Costello as the service acquisition executive and acting assistant secretary, you got a secretary that cares a lot about acquisition and making it work effectively for companies and for the nation. So he's going to keep pushing, using the tools that are available to be able to get real warfighting capability at the right cost as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I still can't believe that Congress can do their job and confirm those people that have been nominated for months. It's just mind-boggling to me. But there's two last questions before we let you go. I know it's been a long session. So two questions. Of course, Nax always has great thoughts. And he's talking about the fact that in the rest of the world, data plus software development plus AI is operations. Should we still continue to separate acquisition and operations? I never actually understood that for a long time, and I never even understood what acquisition was, coming from the commercial side for a long time, because it's just not cut this way on the commercial side. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think, there's always two ways to do this. One is sort of organize and approach things differently, or leverage the system to achieve the same end state. So for my team, that's why advocating for how to shape it, we wanted a third acquisition, a third rated operator, like pilots, intelligence people, and then a third technology operator and acquisitions. You got like each of the communities, there together, better able to understand, translate, write, and then partner with the military requirements community, the force design side, and then as well as the POs on the technical side. And I think I've just seen that time and time again be proved. That's really helpful when you can bring those tightly coupled together. And the secretary's matched that on the operational imperatives. So his teams underneath them have pulled from the communities as well. Everybody that's probably been in this will agree that the linear process of somebody writing down a list of requirements, putting it on paper, coordinating it, passing it to headquarters validating it, sending it back over to the to Congress to approve a budget, to then go back to AQ, to then assign a PEO, to then go begin pre-milestone or analyses, and then A, B, and so on. Like that's a long process. That is a linear process. And just like any game of like children's telephone, you've lost a lot between that initial operator input and then the acquisition execution. And so bringing those two sides as closely together as possible in those communities, so that they're not thought of as over the transom, but as partners all along the way is kind of essential to do that. We are doing that, but it's in pockets. Different services have different approaches to that. Like, the Navy's got, if you're a submarine rated operator, you're going to at some point probably do a tour in the submarine acquisition community and then kind of go back. So you sort of move in and out. So your operators are doing acquisition and your acquisition doing so there's a blending of the community there. We have dedicated acquisition professionals. There's pros and cons to kind of both models. And so what you got to do, whether you're coming from the Navy, which is different, or the Air Force and Space Force, which is different, the goal needs to be the same. You've got to bring those communities together. I think that's at a strategic level part of the reason why Secretary Kendall has called these operational imperatives, because you got to let the operational focus pull. And it's imperative, meaning it must be done, pull the technology through to be able to solve the operational challenges. So he's resetting the strategic mindset of how to think about the program objective memorandum, the POM build, so that at least at the strategic level, they're focused on solving those challenges. But yeah, Nick, I agree with you and the person who asked the question about not just those three types of technologies, but certainly those are obvious ones where they move at such speed that you can't have this separation in time and space of the user with the developer. Those need to come together.
All right, last question. Can you touch, and it's kind of two people ask kind of the same question, but can you touch on cross-domain data sharing and the DAS future there? And when they say cross-domain, they mean like including coalition data sharing. Like
we're talking like CDSs, or you're talking about like physical domains?
I think they talk about physical domains, and including with NATO and Five Eyes and so on.
Yeah,
kind
well,
I
mean,
MP on steroids, I guess.
Yeah. So I think this is so from that perspective, either domains and services, it's essential. I think there's a lot of ocean to boil, and so the secretary and the chiefs are really asking the questions through this on which eddy and pool and to focus on first, so that the operational imperative drives the focus there. But clearly the need is to be able to move information across, but it's not, the secretaries is not simply to move data, it's to do something. And so given the vast amount of places you can go first, second, and third, the analysis is underway to focus on where that is. So from a information sharing, that's very important to the warfighters, our major commands and deltas out there working with their service partners as well as the allies and partners. It continues to be a need that I hear to be able to share that, things like mission partner environment, and also multiple classification levels. And so trying to tackle that as effectively as we can. let's touch on the technological front on things like CDSs. We've got to be able to do this at scale, we've got to come up with a more enterprise approach from technology to be able to address things like CDS and other technologies to enable that function so that we can do it at scale and speed and not have to reinvent the wheel each time as much as we do. So there's some technology and policy solutions that are important here. But then at the end of the day, that enterprise connectivity environment that we've got here for the Space Force and Air Force is going to be essential to move data across. And then from a Department of Defense perspective, I think that's one of those things that the CDAO is going to be able to pull and leverage across the services in OSD with the ability to, in some ways, oversee all the CDOs across the department, at least from a policy and focus perspective, and then the AI and the digital side as well. So I think we'll keep watching that movie as we go. Super important to be able to get there and share and execute information. Like everything else, the beauty of a democracy and lots of moving parts in a free market economy is that means that you get incentives and focus. But if we can energize everybody to go push to solve these problems and crack the nut, that's what the nation needs, and that's what our allies and partners need. So we're certainly all in to make that happen.
And I know last thing that your team is hiring, so maybe you wanted to drop a note on that. And, I'm going to leave the last words to you. And first, wanted to thank you again for joining us today. It was very fun, engaging. You had so many great insights. I hope the people listening are able now to understand the kind of the breadth of your knowledge and what you've been working on for the last few years. I'm very impressed by the work you've been doing for these years that I've been lucky enough to follow you. So over to you.
Great. Thanks, Nic. And I'll share the same about you. It's been a great partner, over the years working. And so we could not have done, half this stuff without your partnership on the software side and technical vision. So thank you for that. And thanks for having me on your show. We do have, if you're out there and you're saying, boy, this sounds interesting, we'd love to get involved in either systems architecture or architecture of architectures for the Space Force and the Air Force. We are hiring folks as well. So we're looking to get a kind of a cool way to advocate that. But you can certainly reach out to me with resumes on LinkedIn. We're also going to be partnering with the National Security Innovation Network, I presume here shortly, to be able to bring in new streams of talent that care about technology and national security. You can always go to USA Jobs, but that's not always the most interesting pathway to do it. But we are onboarding individuals that have the technical expertise to go expand the architecture team and work on all the initiatives that we just talked about, and partnering with a tremendous, making the space economy real and defended and defensible and thrive, and being able to enable space, air, and cyber power. So would love to have more capable individuals that are excited about the mission join the team. And thanks to all of you for taking time out to be able to hear more about the broad technical priorities, certainly the Secretary's leadership and the two chiefs, and to hear about what our team at the Department of the Air Force Chief Architect Office does and is trying to help make real. So thanks to each of you for your questions and your interests and listening for so long, and look forward to continuing the dialogue going forward. Thanks, Nic.